So yeah, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next episode for Infinite
bye.
Forbidden. I can't believe they dropped Maxx 3 in the middle of the
Maxx
podcast.
3. Okay,
like, that
what's
is so funny.
Okay, so
it's really cool, actually. You know what? It makes for some interesting content.
Let me read this real quick and let me actually think about it for a second because I was kind of distracted during the podcast. Okay, Molcharmy Fuvaros, level 4 Wind-Winged Beast. You can activate one other Molcharmy monster effect the turn you activate this effect. They are going to turn this into an archetype.
I mean, I already called that they were going to make one for each like area, right?
That only made sense because of how the first one was worded, right? Like, why would they word it like that if they weren't going to make more? If you control no cards, you can discard this card, apply these effects this turn. Each time your opponent normal or special summons a monster from the deck and or extra deck, immediately draw one card. During the end phase, if the number of cards in your hand is more than the number of cards your opponent controls plus 6, you must randomly shuffle cards from your hand into the deck so that the number in your hand equals the number your opponent controls plus 6. So the thing is, with this one, because it draws more cards, it actually could happen, but the problem is that you still end on a lot of cards, right? It just says there's a maximum, right?
Well, you only end on 7, right? Well, it depends how many monsters they have.
Well, if they end on 1 card on the board, then you end on 7.
So in theory, if they just push through and then summon 5 guys, what? You can keep 11 cards in your hand?
Yeah.
Jesus.
That's not really a drawback. Also, you can use those cards along the way, right? You can like Veiler and Imperm and all that.
Can I just say, by the way, like the best argument, quote unquote, against Maxx C is fine for going second, right? Which, fine, but it's still really bad because you're essentially passing, right? And I feel like this kind of just is going to be the same thing.
I feel like this would have been fine if it had just said extra deck. If it stops the absurd amount of extra deck spams, then I'm kind of okay with it. Like if my opponent can still like summon something from the deck maybe and then end on still like Appaloosa, I get 1 draw out of it. I've stopped my opponent from doing some stuff and they still get to end on something, then it would have been fine, fulfilled its purpose. The fact that you can't even summon from the deck, let's look at it from a practical example right now. What if you have this and you're playing against Snake Eyes, right? Like your opponent normal summons Snake Eye Ash, adds Poplar, activates effect. At this point, you can't use it yet. They summon the Poplar, they grab the Temple or Original Sinful Spoils, and then you drop this before they access the extra deck. What they would do in this case is probably go Poplar, search Temple, and then if they get hand trapped with this one, they can make IP, activate the field spell, place something in the spell and trap zone, and pass. So you get 1 draw and your opponent passes on IP plus field spell. But that's like an okay situation, isn't it? Like you haven't killed them, but that's also just one example, right? Don't get me wrong, that usage of the card, chat, is really good. But keep in mind, you can only do it going second. So I feel like overall that'd be fine. That's just Maxx C though. No, it's not Maxx C. If you Maxx C in that situation, you get an extra card and you can use it going first as well. You can main deck it without any drawback. It's not the same.
Why didn't they just make it so that it was extra only and then just make a Molcharmy for main deck? Like, because
that's what I would have preferred.
Theme, right?
I would have preferred that.
Like the theme was like they were going for like each type of summon. So, you know, just if you're gonna make an archetype of Molcharmies, which is what they were trying to do, like you make one for grave summons, hand summons, main deck summons, extra deck summons.
Some of those are definitely too bad.
But that's the thing, they're supposed to be targeted, right? Like, against this matchup, you can play this Molcharmy. Against that matchup, you can play that Molcharmy, I think is what the theme is supposed to be. I don't think it should be a catch-all good card in every side deck, which is, I think, what this is definitely going to be.
I mean, is summoning from the deck, how common is it really? Okay, Unchained gets murdered by the deck part.
That's the problem. It depends on the deck, right? Because there's some decks that summon from the extra, for example, a ton, but they aren't really doing a lot if you think about it, right? Like Salomon Great, I think, is a good example. You have to go into Balinks, then you go into a Sunlight Wolf.
Yes,
right?
Salad dies to the extra deck portion.
So it depends on the deck, I think, is where it really hurts.
I guess one word of like positivity here. The responsible people for the TCG don't like Maxx C. That's why it's been banned forever. They don't agree with the idea of Maxx C. So this is basically, we're going to get to try and see how this sort of errata version of Maxx C is going to work out. And I think if it's too powerful, there's a chance we also get it banned, right?
Ugh, that's like a big if. We're looking at like ages into the future, you know?
But
right?
I mean,
like,
the thing is, it's not as good as Maxx C. It's not even close. I want to emphasize that.
Absolutely.
The fact that it has the basically errata of you can't have any cards, that alone makes it more balanced. Plus, it's not every special summon. It's a lot of the special summons, but it's not all of them. So it is a weaker Maxx C.
The problem is like you're making the barometer Maxx C, right? Which that shouldn't be how it is because no Maxx C is ideal. Watered down Maxx C is still bad. Mostly.
I don't know if that's true.
I think this one is too powerful.
Some mechanic that helps you going second by giving you extra cards is good.
Okay, look at it this way, right? I think this card was designed fundamentally to fix going second, right? I don't want to see cards like this designed to fix going second. I want to see more cards designed like Typhon, like Zeus, like Ecclesia, like, you know, these bonus effects you get for going second. I think that's how you fix going second in Yu-Gi-Oh! Not Band-Aid Maxxing, right? I think this is a poor way to address the going second problem.
You think like Phantasme is a poorly designed card?
No, I think Phantasme is like fine.
Okay, so you do think there is definitely a balancing to where getting extra cards is a good design for going second.
Yeah, because like Phantasme is like, what, best case scenario, you're mulliganing like 2 or 3 cards away, right? Whereas this, depending on the deck you're playing, you could just give your opponent like 5 cards.
So this is what I agree with. If this card ends up being a complete turn skip for too many decks, I hate it. That was specifically why I was okay with Molcharmy Perulia, because it felt like it didn't turn skip people. It was just play a little bit, give them like 2 cards, 3 cards. Maybe.
Phantasme was a really strong like kind of like tempo presence as well as like fixing your hand. This is almost no downsides. This is literally just side deck this for going second and activate, and you're probably going to get a draw.
I guess the big question with this card, and I guess that's the bad thing about it, like one of the arguments has always been like, if it incentivizes people to maybe play more mid-rangey decks, it'd be good. But I don't think this one actually does that, because it's only a side deck card. Like, you would still play the combo decks.
Enjoy your stream. I gotta get up. See ya.
Oh, all right. See ya. Today's video is sponsored by Holon Card Shop. Holon Card Shop is your place to go for all kinds of your TCG needs. But most importantly, they got a huge selection of OCG sleeves at a fair price. They sell them in both the full packs, but also in packs of 15 in case you want to go just sleeve your extra deck in those typically a little bit more expensive sleeves. You can just pick up packs of 15 over there. They also got the over sleeves that I'm using, just in case you guys are wondering. People ask me all the time. These are the ones that I would recommend you guys. They got singles, other accessories as well. Go check out their link in the description down below. You can use Josh5 for 5% off. Thanks to Holon for sponsoring today's video, and let's continue with today's topic. Man, I don't know how I feel about this. It depends a little bit on what kind of decks they design in the future, right? Because the example that I mentioned with Snake Eyes, I genuinely think would be fine. If you use this card to force your opponent into an IP Masquerena pass, where you only get 1 draw out of it, that is a fine interaction for me. The problem is a lot of decks that I can think of right now from recent history, it doesn't do that, right? Unchained is pretty much dead to this card, right? I mean, I guess it's not dead. As an example, let's say your opponent goes normal summon an Unchained monster, activate Charvara in hand. They activate the Unchained in the graveyard, your opponent chains this one. They summon another Unchained, you draw 1. And I guess then they go Unchained Soul of Rage, you draw another card, and they get a trap. So they pass on Rage plus Trap, and you have a +1. Even in that example, it's not that bad. Still a good trade. I mean, yeah, it's still a good card in that example. I'm worried about the decks where this card just completely ruins the deck. At which point do we think that this card is too powerful? I think 3 or more is where it starts getting really ridiculous. What this is saying is we need like decks that can make somewhat of a board in like 1 or 2 summons from deck or extra deck. I'm gonna just give you an example. After this card releases, potentially we go in a direction where we play, for example, this little dude. So that if you get hit with this card, your plan B, quote unquote, is to just link into Silhouette Rabbit and pass the turn or something. You're ending on very little, so you'd have to play a lot of non-engine to counter your opponent's turn. Another problem that I have with this is the fact that it does not incentivize you to play a lot of engine in your deck. If your opponent hits you with this card and you have to end on something like this, or SP Little Knight, or IP Masquerena and just pass the turn, that is only fine if you have non-engine in your hand to help you get through the opponent's turn. If you have a hand full of engine, then you're just gonna die to most modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks. You can take the challenge and end on a slim board. Yeah, that's the question, I guess. How far do you go into comboing before this gets ridiculous? I think if they had just done extra deck, I would have liked this card. Because you can still do some stuff, you know, summon your Unchains from the deck and all that, but you can't go like Yama into Rage, into Appaloosa, all that. I mean, Appaloosa is a bad example for Unchained, but you know what I mean, right? But That is a completely hypothetical scenario because this is what the card is. We're gonna have to wait and see. I am usually on the more optimistic side of things, so I will say I think there's a chance that this card is not as format breaking as we think it is. But my initial instinct is that this is bad for the TCG, but good for Master Duel. Because, I mean, at this point, look, if they're not banning Maxx C, it's literally insane. It was already crazy with Pirellia. If this thing is not meant to replace Maxx C, I don't even know. Like, I'm losing all faith in OCG. Why is this bad for the TCG? Well, because in the TCG, we don't have Maxx C, and I would prefer to just not have it. We do not need a replacement for Maxx C because it's already banned. In the OCG and in Master Duel, I am open for a Maxx C replacement card. So if they ban Maxx C and give us this instead, I'm like, okay, well, that's better. Both formats managed by OCG Konami, right? And OCG Konami clearly thought that Maxx C was necessary. They were not just going to ban Maxx C. So that is not an option in the universe that we live in. Like, they were never gonna just ban Maxx C and not give us a replacement or something like that, right? And so the fact that they are trying to find a replacement, I think for Master Duel is good, right? Because I would rather play Master Duel formats with this card than with Maxx C. That's that. So for the TCG, I have a slight fear that this card is going to be too powerful and then it's going to make post-sided games very weird. At the same time, think about it this way. We've had a lot of auto-win cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! For after siding already. The player going first currently has the option to side deck 50 cards or something that immediately win you the game. The player going second doesn't have that option. A bunch of different floodgates and all that stuff that the player going first can side deck to instantly win. Those cards have not ruined the game. The game is still alive. Obviously, we want those cards to be banned, but the fact that they make one of those cards for going second, I don't think is going to kill Yu-Gi-Oh! I think some of this is overreacting. I think it's a very powerful card. I would have liked it if it was balanced a little bit more, but it is basically that new version of Maxx C that people have been asking for a long time. It was a very common suggestion to make Maxx C, but require you to have no cards on the board, right? It's that and even a little bit weaker than that. We're gonna see if it's as problematic as Maxx C. I think they're gonna ban it in the TCG because the TCG people banned Maxx C. So if this card is just Maxx C, but like slightly worse and still way too powerful, I think it's gonna be on the ban list at some point as well. We agree that people are overreacting. Look, maybe a little bit, but I don't want to understate how good this card is. When I'm going first after siding with most decks and my opponent drops this card, it's going to be really hard for me to decide what I make. Let's be real here. Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks, when they go first nowadays, need interaction, right? You need something to interrupt them. Otherwise, most other Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks are going to kill you. The question is, how reasonable is it to end on something that at least gives you a good game under this card? SP pass with one special summon, is that enough against a 6-card hand? I would say against most modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks, that's not enough. And that is specifically because of how relevant the extra deck has been in putting up interruptions, which is a big criticism, I guess, to modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that there really aren't that many good main deck monsters anymore that have any interaction with your opponent. Most of the main deck monsters are just tools to summon more extra deck monsters. If I get hit with this in my sprite deck, it doesn't count the sprites that I'm summoning from my hand. So I can still summon like Reds and Carrots, Fenrir. If we had more of those kind of cards in the game, I think we wouldn't complain about this card that much. If your opponent goes special Fenrir and then normal summon a level 2 monster, suddenly this card doesn't look that good, right? There are worlds where it's possible to play under this card. That previous example that I just made of Fenrir, normal summon level 2, special blue jet or something, that does not work under Maxx C, right? You can't do anything under Maxx C, but you can do those things under this card. I just want to make sure that you guys understand that there is a big difference between this card and Maxx C. My general feeling towards this card, just to get this to a close, if I had to put it into like numbers, I would say like I'm 60-40 that this is not a good idea, but I don't think this is like dooming the game at all. I think it's slightly too powerful, and I mean slightly too powerful. And I think it's going to depend on, are we going to be able to discover ways to play around this card? Are we going to discover ways to make a board in just 1 or 2 draws for this card that are fine? If the answer to that is yes, then I think the card is okay. If the answer to that is no, then I think the card's a problem.